But yeah, as Adoya said, I'm a business advisor at the Chamber of Commerce, and funding and fundraising is pretty much my bread and butter here. That's where I really work, helping businesses to raise funds, particularly in that R&D, which is research and development space. So that's developing new products, particularly things that are quite technical and exciting. We always say it's anything from chocolate to electric airplanes is where we work. So it's quite diverse. But yeah, I've been asked to talk a bit about funding and fundraising, which is often not the most exciting topic, but when you start getting money, it's pretty exciting. So people always like to have a chat when I can say I can bring some money to the table. But I'll just launch into it. I've got a few slides, and hopefully you've got some questions you can ask afterwards that will help bulk it out. Ultimately, there's a few different ways of raising fundraising, but it's going to be a little bit different for a student business than it would be for a larger startup, or depending on where you're going to be going. So the first of those is really around friends and family. Is a great place to start. So asking the people that you know, that you've got in your networks, can they help you out with some of the costs in your business? Because to be fair, your costs probably aren't going to be huge at this stage. You don't want to be going to somewhere like a bank or an investor to be working with a small amount of money. And if you can help show the benefits to friends and family, why not get them involved? So that's always a good place to start. Crowdfunding also works really well with early stage businesses, and particularly with younger businesses. So businesses like yourself, students, where you'll probably have a better understanding of how crowdfunding works compared to a lot of the older people that are trying to raise money through crowdfunding websites. So examples like that are Pledge Me is a New Zealand-based crowdfunding website where you can talk about your project, get people involved, and can even give them something in return when they're submitting their funds. Patreon's another really cool example, which I think works really well with student businesses, particularly like university student businesses, where you can tell the story of your business, get people excited about it, and then have people to constantly fund your money. So it'll be a small amount of money every month, and you're probably pretty aware of even how Patreon works, but absolutely recommend it as something to consider for your business. Another option could be looking at selling one of your early stage products. So just at that launch phase, when you think, okay, we're not quite good enough to go to market, but maybe you could even still start selling what you've got as a minimum viable product, as something in its most basic form, and see if you can raise a bit of capital that way. And that could be just going to a local market. It could be through selling at your school, but just seeing other ways that you can sell a basic version of what you're trying to create. And don't worry if it's not perfect, because your customers will understand that you're a growing business, and then as things get bigger, you can make it a bit better. Schools and universities is always a good one. I went through the YES program when I was a student, and I was fortunate to be able to get some funding through my school. I sent them, wrote up a business plan, and I put it to the school, and I said, look, if you can fund $150, I can start this business. The business went terribly, didn't go well, but it was still a good experience that I got, and yeah, the school did not get their money back, unfortunately. So I don't recommend that necessarily, but hopefully you can show them a good return on what they're going to put in. There's a whole lot of grants and prizes that you can go for, whether that's through the government or through the local community, and I'll touch on that in a second in a bit more detail, because that's often a good one to go for. But bootstrapping is often a term you hear as well when you're starting up a business, and you might wonder what that means. And that's really around just doing things with the minimal cost. So using the money that you've got available and trying to get things, beg, borrow, steal, whatever you can to make the business viable. That means making things yourself. That means not paying people to do something that you could potentially do yourself. So just trying to operate as lean as you possibly can is a great way to sort of not necessarily fund a business, but still get by without introducing funds. So talking about grants and prizes, there's a lot that's available. It all kind of moves in different phases, but there's some things that are particularly relevant to student businesses. And when we went to the speed mentoring day that we had with you, I noticed that a lot of the projects were focused around sustainability and providing community benefits. So if you look at the Christchurch City Council website, they've actually got a page for community funding projects. And you can have a look there what sort of funding they have that will address problems in the community that you can then help with, which is really quite fascinating. And on that same line, the City Council has some funding for sustainability as well, which you can look at. So a lot of the projects that I know that you're working on are sort of fixing a sustainability issue. So if that's something that you're working on, absolutely check it out. The Waste Minimisation Fund is another one like that, where you can try and get some funding to help show that you're creating a solution to remove waste. Research and development funding gets a little bit more complicated, and that's the area where I work. And if you're at all interested in that, I'll be very happy to have a chat with you to talk about how it works. But ultimately, that's funding to help you solve really difficult problems that haven't been solved anywhere in the world yet. And if we can help you through with that, there's some pretty good funding opportunities there. We can support that process. The other really cool thing to look at is some of the local industry incubators that pop up around New Zealand, and particularly in Christchurch. Just this week, wrapping up this week, is the Agri-Tech, so the agricultural challenge, which we'll be showcasing next week. And that's all focused around businesses that have solutions to do with farming and agriculture, and they get some prize money out of that. So you can kind of look for challenges and incubators and things that are specific to your industry and your business and say, hey, could we join this, and can we provide a solution that the council, the government's willing to support, an area they can focus. So really look out for those if you can find anything in that sort of space. So, I mean, what helps when you're looking for funding? There's a few key things that you kind of really want to do well, and this is particularly relevant when you're looking for investors, or even if you're going for crowdfunding options. But you really want to tell your story. Like, think about what led you to create this business. What inspired you? Because often people that start a business are quite passionate, and the more passionate you are, the easier it is to tell your story. So as long as you can share that well and convince others that it's something exciting that you want them to be involved in, it'll make your life a lot easier. The other thing is really highlight your skills and abilities, particularly when you're working with bigger investors like angel investors and things. They're going to ask, who's in the team, and that's really important. So really got to show why are you capable? Why can you deliver on this project? Why are you the one that can carry this through? So really focus on your skills and abilities. As you go through, and when you get investors on board, and people that even aren't investors, people that have maybe helped you out, they've volunteered their time, they've given you some support, keep them in the loop. Always keep them updated on what you're working on, what progress you've made, because that also just keeps them involved and keeps them talking about what you're doing with other people. So that's always a good idea. And one thing that you've got a unique benefit with being students is that you've got a fantastic network. You've got all your peers, you've got your schools, you've got these people willing to support you. So lean into your network, use what's available, share stuff across social media. Really spread the word about what you're doing and what you're looking for. It's okay to sort of ask for things and say, does anybody know somebody in this sort of space? Can they help me with that? Very, very strongly recommend that. I'm not sure, Adoya, if the slides are going to get shared after this, but I just wanted to share a couple of examples. There's some really cool guides on each of these websites, just some tips about how to raise funds, and they're not hugely complicated. Really recommend it. On NZT, it's just really the basics on how you can raise funding. A lot of it is kind of geared towards working with investors, but on the Callaghan Innovation page, if you go to that Innovation Skills Capital Education page, they've got a really cool online course where you can learn how to talk to investors, what they're looking for, the language to use. And it's quite high level stuff, but it's pretty fascinating. So I really recommend it if you've got, 40 minutes to spare to watch through some of the videos and just learn a bit about it. It's pretty cool. But that's ultimately me. I might have sped through that, sorry, but very keen to have some questions.
As Adoya mentioned, I'm Jacob. I am the head of innovation for Ministry of Awesome. Ministry of Awesome, in partnership with ARA and Christchurch City Council, have established a startup hub called Te Ohaka, which is in the ground floor of ARA's engineering campus on Moorhouse Avenue. So if you've ever been driven through or driving through Moorhouse Avenue, look to the left, and you'll see a lot of people just working quite late or even on weekends, and you'll see our branding and all. Um, in that photograph, the ground floor is empty, but believe me, it's not empty right now. So Ohaka in Tereo means nest. It also means economy. And what we really hope to achieve is to support young enterprises coming through and really give them a safe sandspit so that they can, test their ideas, get a lot of support, and grow from here. We have hosted or are hosting startups who actually came through, one or two who came through Yes. So it was Emily Blythe, who was one of our most successful startups. She went through the Yes program when she was in school. And the last year's winner of Yes from Hawke's Bay Bible. And now they're at university, and they've developed a edible and soluble fruit sticker, and they're based at Te Ohaka as well. And yeah, so that's a bit about us. You can just go to ministryofawesome.com or tehaka.com and find out more about us. And yeah, so we run this hub in partnership with ARA, and the whole objective is to create opportunities for ARA learners to work with these startups who are doing cutting edge work while they are studying here, and also create opportunities for ARA learners, ARA students to pursue their entrepreneurial ideas while they're actually studying here. So we are also the entrepreneurial hub for our students. Cool. So I'll probably just jump right into it. I'll try to keep in time, but the funny thing is actually I'm also a lecturer here in ARA, and I take around 9 hours to get through market research and validation. So I'll try to get it under 10 minutes, but I'll apologize if I don't. I always like to set outcomes, and if there's 10 minutes and from the interactions with 2 outcomes that we would like to drive, and fundamentally about market research for me, 2 things. One is identify who's the user or customer for your product or service which you are proposing, and people with those unmet needs. And once you have identified who those customers are and who those end users are, then identify the pain points for them. What are the specific problems that they have. So these are the 2 outcomes. So sort of high level outcomes I've set for this session. Always start with the customer. That's what we always tell the startups who come to pitch to us. We see around 200 startups in a calendar year pitching to get into our incubator program or into the other accelerators that we run. And the first question we ask, who's your customer and what do you know about them? And you should know your customer like your best friend. And if you don't know much about that well about your best friend, forget what I said. Maybe know your customer like you know yourself. So try to create a profile or an avatar of your customer. That's what we always see. So empathy is the key here. Only if you understand your customer really well, and if you understand your users really well, will you actually be able to build something, build a product which they need, or create a service which they'll actually pay to use. So starting off, 5 points. 1, demographics. So you should understand age group, ethnicity, things like that about your customers, which can be quite useful. Their economic status, how much pay they're taking in, what is their sort of spend average. So those kind of demographic details are quite important. Psychographics is things like age and other things are important, but not as important as the taste, preferences, priorities of your customers. So imagine you are developing a new food product. So from that point of view, what is that key information about your customer which will be most relevant to you? It might be that your customer is very sustainability focused. So that sustainability push might be really influencing their purchase decision, or they might be all about organic and healthy living. So those are the kind of taste and preferences of your customer you would like to know. Proxy product is, okay, you think your customer has a certain problem or they're looking for a new solution. Think about what are they using right now. How do they satisfy that need? How do they try to solve that problem right now? The product that they're using right now or the service they're currently utilizing might not be the best alternate, best product. It might be really inadequate, but what understanding what are they using right now could be quite helpful. Then really try to describe what a day in their life looks like. Who are they? What do they like? What do they not like? Where do they go to work? And what does their life really look like? And finally, watering hole. So where do they get their information from? So watering hole, if you in the natural world, predators go to the watering hole. That's why animals will flock. So as a product owner, when you're trying to market and sell your product, you want to know where you can access your customer, where you can get your marketing message across to them, and where you can sell to them, whether it be Facebook or it's a physical space or it's a virtual space, whatever that is, you should know that. And in terms of talking about primary market research, these are the kind of 9 things which I always think about, like who is the end user and what is the application they're looking for, what are the benefits they're looking for, who are the lead customers. Lead customers will be the first people who are most likely to purchase your product. What are the different details that you know about the market itself? What do you know about the size of it? Then competition, which is quite important. Who are the other players who are offering a similar product? Once you have identified, we'll go into that customer piece more after this. But first off the mark, it's really important for you to understand what is the problem that your customer is trying to solve. So I've sort of written a problem statement that Ministry of Awesome is trying to solve. So we really feel that we can have more impact, successful women entrepreneurs that we can support. And that's a problem not just for Ministry of Awesome, for the entire business ecosystem in New Zealand. That's a problem. So that is our problem statement, that how can we create a business ecosystem where we can see more successful women entrepreneurs. So we want more women entrepreneurs. We want more capital being accessed by female entrepreneurs, and we want more women investors as well. So that's our problem statement. Very concise, clear. When you do a lot of over this course of this program, over the course of YES1, when you get a lot of support and mentoring, you will hear a lot about, hey, what is the problem you're trying to solve? What are the pain points? And that is quite important. Doing research on that is quite important as well. But then when you go out and identify a problem statement or identify a particular pain in a market, always do a check whether the problem that you have identified is something which is a fit with your team. So you have to be passionate about it. Entrepreneurship is a very hardest journey. So do make sure that the problem that you are trying to solve or the idea is actually something which your team deeply cares about. Otherwise, it won't be a good fit. So you might uncover a really great opportunity, a big problem which industry might pay a lot of money to solve, but if you don't feel a personal affinity to it, it's really hard to go on. I'm not sure if I play this video, it can really hear, but I'll probably share this with Idoya later, and Idoya can share along and have a look at the video. And I thought it's a good example on how important it is to identify a problem. So it's a video about how skateboard was invented. So skateboard as a concept evolved in Florida, in Miami, where in through the late 60s and 70s. So in Miami and in Florida, surfboarding is quite popular, and during those days where the waters are too choppy for people to go and surf, what some crafty people came up with was a surfboard on wheels. And that was the first iteration of the skateboard. And it just had really regular wheels. I think they used clay wheels at that point. And within a couple of years, it got to a point that many cities in America were banning skateboards because they were too dangerous, because those clay wheels were not really, even a minor bump, it can throw someone off. And so the problem was those wheels. So then, a couple of interesting innovators came up with this idea of this new type of wheel, which will actually be more resistant. It was not clay wheel, so it was from a compound of rubber. So even if it fit a minor bump, you'll actually won't be thrown off. So it was an example of a very simple innovation, but they went on to redefine an entire industry.
Jacob?
Yeah.
You've got 2 more minutes.
Okay, sure. Yeah, so there are different things that you can look at in terms of trying to identify a problem. It can be a market pull, where the market is actively looking for a particular problem they want a solution for, or it could be it could be a market push as well, where you have a really innovative technology or a scientific advancement, and people are not actively looking for a solution, but there might be some relevance in it. And you want to solve a problem with a really high level of sense of urgency. People are really urgently looking for a solution for this. And once you've identified a problem, really think about that. So why your team is the right people to actually solve that problem, and that makes a way more compelling sell. While you're sort of looking at different markets and different opportunities for you to attack, there's a unique template that you can use. So think about whether that market is actually economically attractive to you. Make sure that it's accessible to your sales force, and think whether your team can actually develop a complete product for that particular market with your current capability. And then some markets are just too competitive and such have really entrenched players, so there might not be a lot of scope for you to go in there. Yeah, so do a lot of validation. That's always important. So whatever idea that you have is a hypothesis. So it's really important that you actually, to prove that hypothesis, to turn that into a fact, you actually have to engage. So identify who your customer is, try to identify that problem, and try to find out whether what your idea and your team are the right people to actually solve that. And you can do that by validation. That is, just do as much as user engagement as you can. Thank you. Hope I didn't run too much over time.
So yeah, just a little bit about me. I worked 15 years for IKEA as a marketing content specialist. So my background, I was actually an interior designer, but I rolled into marketing, being responsible for the branding, content creation, content strategy, and all the communication. So I will guide you through branding and storytelling and why it's important for a startup like you guys. So what is branding about? Branding is more than just an easy name that you can recognize. It is also the identity as such, so the way people recognize the brand. It can be through a logo, can be through associated visuals. A good example of that is, for instance, Nike with their very recognizable logo. And then the punchline that goes along with it, just do it. Another part of branding is brand image. So the image of a brand is actually the idea that people develop in their minds. So it also dictates what they expect actually from the brand. So an example in that sense is maybe Rolls-Royce. They have the image of a very luxury car maker. So they can't get into the market of a budget car, even if there is a big market for that, because their existing premium customers would not kindly accept that to get away from that premium brand image. And so it also makes it sometimes hard and impossible to change a brand image. So it's very good that from the start that you know what you're aiming at. And that's what you've seen also in the previous presentation. The market research plays a very important role in that one to define your customers. Thirdly, in branding, important is brand positioning. Brand positioning is actually the way a product is placed in the market. So it basically defines what segments of the market it is targeting, so that you're targeting the right customer, and that can have a great effect on your company performance. I took an example here of Kathmandu. Kathmandu's typical customer is an older baby boomer generation with an age group living longer, traveling extensively, and have a high level of disposable income. However, you can always also target niche targets, because a brand can have different target groups for the same product. But it's a visual identity that positions your brand towards a certain audience. Then you have brand personality. And the brand personality is actually just like the personality of a human being. So it is a certain emotional or personal quality that we associate with a particular brand. I took here the example of Lego, because you can associate that with youthfulness, and every element of that brand identity, including the color of the logo, the typography of the brand name, and everything adds to that personality. Another part important in branding is brand experience. Brand experience is actually everything that a customer goes through while purchasing and using the brand. So for example, how does one feel while ordering food and eating at KFC? How does the staff behave, and how fast do they deliver? And of course, how did the food taste? And as they have many outlets all over the world, they are expected to maintain uniform standards of experience. Then you have brand differentiation. Differentiation, as the word suggests, is just how a brand stands out of the crowd. How can you make yourself different from your competitors? So I took the example of Airbnb that really shook up the whole global hospitality industry with their business model. And then as a last one, brand communication, not to forget. And that is the message that you deliver through all your various marketing sources. So every piece of content should be really accurate, reflecting your brand, from the way it looks to the words that you use. And while branded content shouldn't be overly branded, people should really understand who it was created by. I took the example here of Casper. It's a mattress startup from the US that really disrupted the whole industry with their innovative business model, because they actually don't have a physical store, so you can not test the mattress before buying it online. But they also did it with their very slick visual identity and their content strategy. So all the colors in all their communication are in beige and blue, which are soothing, and then the hand-drawn illustrations bring a sense of comfort to their brand communication. And also storytelling has a very important role to play in brand communication. So that brings me to the second part of this presentation, storytelling, and why it's important to have a good story. So what is your story, your brand story? We are now in an era where people are tired of being talked at and sold to. So people really crave for genuine connections with brands. But how do you cultivate that connection? by telling your brand story. Because through your story, you can humanize your brand and communicate who you are, what you do, and how you can help people. Storytelling actually triggers a biological response. So a brand story grabs attention and engages people across all mediums, because when you're invested in a good story, your brain physically responds to it. So the better you tell your story, the better you can stand out and stake your place in the market. There are some keys to a brand story. There are actually 5 specific elements. And storytelling isn't just about seeing images or hearing a human voice. It's really the core story that matters. When you're telling your brand story, people are naturally captivated. Whether it's the story of how you build your business or the story of how your product improves people's lives, finding that unique brand story is one of the most effective ways to engage and encourage people to build a relationship with your brand. So the 5 key elements. Number 1, it should be meaningful. So everyone is dealing with content shock these days. There are millions of brands fighting for attention, hopping on every bandwagon their competitors are on. Too many brands are focused on what they create and not what people actually care about. So if you want to tell a good story, it has to be interesting and relevant to the people you're trying to reach. I took here an example of Patagonia. They did a marketing campaign that stated, don't buy this jacket. And that was actually to enhance their sustainability approach that they have in the company. And through that marketing campaign, they even sold more jackets actually. But the idea was to give their sustainable message that you don't always have to buy new stuff, but that you also can reuse it, upscale it, and so on. Secondly, it should be personal. You can tell all sorts of stories. They can be entertaining, educational, inspirational, but people really need to feel personally connected to them. So it's important not to just pique interest, but to draw them into your story. So how does your brand improve their life? Why should they take the time to invest in this story? And remember, if there's no place for someone in your story, there's no reason for them to pay attention to it, because of all the bulk of content that we see on a daily basis. I took here as an example Coffee Supreme. It's a New Zealand coffee maker, and they have a beautiful story. So I suggest you go and have a look at their website, to look at their history, how they started up, and how they evolved to become this company. And it's really a nice story to read. Third of all, it should be emotional. A strong brand story is all about stimulating emotion and empathy. So it's not just about what you do, but how you affect people. So sure, maybe your software may automate emails, but it's ultimately making people's lives easier and stress-free. And that's the emotional hook of the story. So if you can trigger that emotion in the first paragraph of a blog or a post on social, or the first few seconds of a video, you will have them hooked. Here I took the example of Nike with their campaign Believe in Something, because that was a really strong one on an emotional level. Fourth of all, it should be simple. So one of the most common mistakes in brand storytelling is trying to say too much. It's far better to tell a very simple story and maximize emotional attachment than to bombard people with different stories or a lot of information that they don't have the time to reflect upon. So give your story singular focus so it becomes easier to connect to. Here I took the example of of IKEA. We did an ad about original IKEA Frakta bag that is very cheap, and we brought that advertising out on the moment that Balenciaga, a very premium brand, brought out a handbag that was actually identical to that Frakta bag that is on the market since 50 years. Then as the last one, it should be authentic. So when you share your brand story, people should know it's your story. That means being open and honest, transparent. It means letting your personality shine through. It also means being consistent. So when you're creating content, it's important to cultivate consistency so that people can not only identify, but also trust your content. And here I took the example of Burger King, who did a marketing campaign with a moldy Whopper on day 28 to show the beauty of non-artificial preservatives in their food. Then it's also about knowing your story, very important. One of the biggest barriers is actually, you really need to understand your own brand, who you are, what you do, what you care about, and why it matters. So identify your core principles, your purpose, your vision, your mission, and your values, so that you understand what your brand is really trying to achieve. Articulate that brand message and be consistent in your messaging and your visual identity, and know your targets, your audience. Once you have a clear idea of that, then you can start to examine what story you're gonna use to help communicate that. So it should be about who you are, because you aren't a faceless corporation. You are a real person or people who started this brand. Real people work in your office, make a product, or run your social media. So putting a face on your brand is one of the best ways to cultivate a connection. So also consider ways you might peel back the curtain to show people who you are, what your culture is like, and what you care about, like behind the scenes of content creation. What do you do? So think about the product or service you provide. There are many ways to talk about or showcase these highlights. So there are unique features that make your product particularly useful or effective, and show them in a surprising way. Who do you do it for? Think about the people you want to help. These are the people who are interested in your business and you're trying to win. So why do you care about them? How do you want to help them? Think about not only what you do, but how it improves people's lives. And then last, why and how do you do it? No matter what your product or service is, there's a reason you exist. So this is the core of your brand, and it also shows the cause you care about. People want to know not just why and what you do, but how. So telling a brand story that shows visibility into your product, production, or process can be impactful and provides the transparency that people really crave. And that was actually it. And my key takeaway from this whole presentation is actually just stay true to yourself, to your brand, to your values and what you stand for, and show that to the world. And then you can bring amazing things. That was it in a nutshell. Branding and storytelling in 10 minutes.
So you'll probably be aware that sustainability is a pretty key component of running a company these days. So it used to be something that a few companies did, and it used to be something that was tacked on to make customers feel better. But now you need to consider sustainability in your company, and that can be done in many different ways. So some companies, that is their main purpose, to run a business that is impact focused and focused on sustainability. And others are running a business and sustainability is not necessarily the main driver, but is incorporated into the way that you do the business. And it's always easier to think about sustainability right from the beginning instead of trying to fix what you've done in the past. So the things you might want to think about is the obvious one is packaging, but also you might want to think about your supply chain. So you want to think about where your products are coming from, who is supplying them and how they're made. And if you're making them yourself, what are the components you're making them out of? Are they made in New Zealand? Are they produced locally? Are you bringing them in from overseas? and also the end of life as well. So at the end of using the product, what will happen to it? Will it go straight to landfill? Can it be composted? Can it be recycled? These are all things. Can it be reused and just loop back around in the circular economy? So those are things that are good to think about. You can use sustainability to tell your story, and that will fit into your marketing and your branding. But it's really important that you only tell the truth, because customers are good at seeing through what is true and what is greenwashing. So greenwashing, I don't know if you know the term, it's getting more common, but greenwashing is when you say something is good for the environment, but it's not really. So if you say something is biodegradable, but it's not, or you say something is 100% recyclable, but it's not, that's greenwashing. Other ways to greenwash are things like putting a tree in your logo and making the writing green, which happens quite a lot. And it gives the impression of being eco-friendly, but actually you're not doing anything. You've just used green in your logo. So don't do that because it kind of just puts a bad spin on sustainability. So the other thing I'd be aware of is making claims about compostability or recycling, whether something is recyclable or not. You really need to check that things can actually be composted if they're home compostable or commercially compostable, before you just go and say that you can put it in your home compost heap. The other thing to think about is you are running, whether you're running a business or not for profit, you need to make sure that you are financially viable. So your sustainability goals do have to fit in with your business goals. If you are too hard out in sustainable or ethical or social when you're starting up a business, you might not, your costs might be too high. Sometimes they're higher if you're sourcing more eco-friendly options. That's not to say that you shouldn't do it. It's to say that you need to work on your pricing correctly and make sure customers know why your product is a little bit more expensive. So this is a thing called pricing transparency, where you say, look, my product costs $1 more than this other product, but that's because the packaging is made from certified forest cardboard, FSC certified trees, or something like that. Or it costs a little bit more because it's made in New Zealand. We didn't ship it in from overseas, so therefore our carbon footprint is lower. So just telling these reasons why your product might be a bit more expensive is a good thing to do. I think that's about all for a quick summary.
Hi, so I'm Rachel Dawson. I've been asked to talk about IP in 10 minutes, which is a massive task. So what I thought I would do is share with you all my IP checklist, which basically sets out all the different forms of IP and actually applies it to your business as well. So what I will do is share my screen, which is here. And I thought I'd just run through that for you. And I'll try not to just talk to the screen because there's nothing worse than.
By the way, I just paused that because she couldn't share the screen, but what she's going to say is going to make complete sense, don't worry, and I'll share that document with you afterwards.
But yes, I'll summarise IP in 10 minutes, even though I can speak fast. This is going to be a struggle, so good luck keeping up. So 4 main forms of IP that will be relevant to you and your business. Let's go to the next page. There's patents, registered designs, trademarks and copyright. So a patent is something, it's the way that something works, it's a method or a process, it's a new or improved way of doing things. You can only get protection from a patent if you've applied for the grant of the patent in the countries where you want protection. The big thing to know about patents is you have to keep it secret before you file in most countries. Some countries have a grace period where you can disclose it and go mad about it on your social media and then file, but it's best to be on the safe side and double check with the patent attorney first before you start telling anybody about your cool ideas. If you don't want to patent, make sure you document why. Don't just do it. Don't just not do it because you think it's too expensive. Because you can rely on trying to keep it a secret these days. It's a lot harder to keep things secret than perhaps in the past, given that we're mostly online these days. But you can also try and focus on other forms of IP, which I'll cover soon, like copyright, registered designs, or trademarks. Again, if you don't decide to patent though, do make sure that you check whether or not somebody else has patented it, because they may have exclusive rights in their idea. You may end up infringing their rights and end up with a whole lot of debt and not even be able to launch your awesome ideas onto the world. A great thing about doing that search as well is that you may actually learn lots of great ways to improve your invention and or find that it's been done so many times before that it's actually not worth going down that path. Anyway, so that's patents. Have a think about whether or not you might have patents in your business and capture them in this IP tool that I've built. Okay, the next form of IP that I wanted to talk about is a registered design. So similar to patents, you can only have rights in a registered design, the secret's in the name, is if you register it. A design is not about the way things work, it's about the way it looks. So it's the non-functional elements. It's the pattern on your bag or your jersey. It's the three-dimensional shape of something. So yeah, that's a design. Like patents, it's much wiser not to disclose people. Don't post about it online before you file. In New Zealand and Australia, for example, if you do that before you file, then you can't get a design, sorry. So if you don't want to go for design registration, you could look at copyright protection. For example, the sketches or the molds that you've used to create the design could be protected by copyright. But yes, again, even if you don't decide to register your design, please do check that no one else has registered it, because otherwise you could be sued for infringement, and that is not cool. Okay, next form of IP is trademarks. So unlike patents and designs, you can have protection in a trademark if it's registered or unregistered. So a registered trademark gives you the sole right to use that trademark throughout the country of registration. So it's a really powerful tool. A trademark can be used to stop other people using the name within their trading name, even if they've incorporated the company name. It can be used to stop people registering a domain name that's similar to yours. So yeah, a registered trademark especially is a very powerful tool. You can have rights in an unregistered trademark though, if you've established a sufficient reputation in the mark that you could show consumers would be confused by your use of that mark. The danger is if you don't file for registration soon enough and somebody thinks, wow, that's an amazing trademark, they could file for registration before you, and it's a whole world of pain trying to get that trademark back. And in fact, it may not be possible if you haven't established enough of a reputation yet. So top tip is the wee TM symbol. You can use that anytime. It just means you consider the mark as your trademark. It's the R in a circle. That means it's a registered trademark. So yeah, even if you do decide not to register your trademark, much like patents and designs, do check first whether or not anybody else has decided to register their mark, because again, you could be infringing their rights, but also check whether somebody's actually using a mark without a registration, because if they've established enough of a reputation in the mark, they may be able to stop you starting to use the mark. Not confusing at all, but yes, so those are some tips for trademarks. The last form of IP I really wanted to highlight to you was copyright. Now, unlike the previous three forms of IP, copyright just exists automatically. If you've come up with an original creation, so original in the sense that it's your own work that you've come up with independently, and it's taken some form of effort to create. I mean, it's not just the word pen, even though it's a written work, it's not very original, it's not very creative. It doesn't have to be that long. It can be just a tagline or a slogan. You could have copyright in that. You can have, of course, copyright in artistic works like photographs, sketches, drawings. You can have, yeah, there's a limited list of works that are protected by copyright. But yeah, there's no form of registration in most countries. That you can register them in the US, but in most countries, it just simply exists on creation. It is wise to use the WC symbol to show that you claim copyright in the work. And there's also a great system called Creative Commons, which is a free licensing system where you can actually tell people how they're able to use your work. Unlike the other forms of IP, copyright is an international right as well. So there's an international convention called the Berne Convention, which pretty much every country that you'll want to trade in will be a party to. So if you've got rights in your copyright work in New Zealand, then most other countries would enforce your rights there too. One of the big myths with copyright is that if you see something else and you change it by X%, 10, 20, I've heard different amounts, you'll avoid infringement, but that's simply not true. If you take somebody else's work and you actively just try and change different elements, you will be infringing. So that's the difference between infringement and inspiration. If you see something cool and you like it and say, so for example, you go past a house and you love, but maybe it's got a very modern feel, and it's got great big archways at the entrance. If you took the plans to your architect and said, hey, I like these, but can you change these parts? And that original work has copyright, you'll be infringing. But instead, if you went to your architect and say, hey, I'd love a modern house with some great archways at the entrance, and the architect comes up with their own independent design, that's fine, that's inspiration. Cool, I hope that's clear. So yeah, have a look at this IP checklist. It's on my website, that's www.arc.legal, and there's a way of capturing your assets at the back as well. So you're actually capturing your asset list. And make sure as you run your business, you're thinking about those different forms of IP that might come up as you go along. So I hope that helps. IP in 10 minutes. I didn't think it was impossible. Do read the guide more slowly because that should be useful. But yeah, best of luck. And I'm here if you need me. Come check out my website or feel free to reach out. Okay, good luck.